Commander Vex 9 pressed all four of his clawed appendages against the tactical display, watching the blinking dots move across the star chart with mounting dread. The red indicators, they were disappearing, one by one, like candles being snuffed out in a storm. "Another patrol ship has gone silent," reported Lieutenant Crix 4, his voice carrying that particular tremor that meant bad news was coming. "That makes 17 ships lost in the last rotation." Vex 9's mandibles clicked in frustration. 17. The Thrakari Confederation hadn't lost 17 ships in the last 100 rotations combined. And now they were vanishing faster than his aide could update the casualty reports. "Any distress signals? Debris fields? Anything?" "Nothing, Commander. Just silence." The bridge of the Eternal Fang fell quiet except for the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Vex 9 studied the tactical display again, his compound eyes processing the data with the efficiency of a military computer. The missing ships formed a pattern, a rough circle expanding outward from the Terran system. Ah yes, the Terran system, where this whole nightmare had started 3 rotations ago. "Remind me again," Vex 9 said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How exactly did High Command describe this operation?" "A routine hunting expedition against a primitive species." Crix 4's antenna twitched nervously. The exact words were, quote, "sweeping action to eliminate a minor threat before it could develop into a nuisance," unquote. A minor threat. Vex 9's laugh was about as pleasant as grinding metal. These humans were supposed to be barely out of their caves, weren't they? Stone tools and fire, according to the initial reports. Well, sir, the initial reports were somewhat outdated. Somewhat outdated. Vex 9 whirled around, his 6-foot frame casting an intimidating shadow across the bridge. "Crix 4, when our scouts filed those reports, these humans had nuclear weapons, space flight, and what appeared to be a functioning military." "Yes, sir. The Intelligence Division has issued a formal apology for the discrepancy." "An apology. How wonderful. I'm sure that will bring back the crew of the Bone Crusher." The truth was, Vex 9 had known this mission was cursed from the moment they'd received the orders. The Thrakari Confederation had built its reputation on being the galaxy's premier hunters. For 3,000 years, they'd been the ones other species called when they needed something eliminated. Pirates, rogue AI, rebellious colonies, you name it. The Thrakari showed up, assessed the situation and methodically destroyed the target. Clean, efficient, professional. But this was different. "Sir," called out sensor operator Zal 2 from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Ravager's Claw. Captain Hicks 7 is requesting permission to engage a human vessel." Vex 9's blood ran cold. The Ravager's Claw was one of their best ships, commanded by one of their most experienced captains. If Hicks 7 was asking for permission instead of just attacking, it meant the situation was already beyond standard parameters. "Put him through." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the grizzled features of Captain Hicks 7. His usually pristine uniform was torn, and one of his secondary arms hung at an odd angle. Commander Hicks 7's voice was strained. "I need to report unusual resistance from the human vessel." "Define unusual, Captain." "Sir, they're not running." Vex 9 felt his stomach drop. In 30 years of military service, he'd never heard a prey species described as not running. Running was what prey did. It was the natural order of things. "Repeat that, Captain." "The human vessel is not attempting to flee, sir. Instead, they've turned to face us. They're transmitting something on all frequencies." "What kind of transmission?" "It appears to be music, sir. Some kind of rhythmic audio pattern. Our linguistics officer thinks it might be what they call rock music." Vex 9 stared at the display. Music. They were playing music while facing down a Thrakari warship. Either these humans were completely insane, or they knew something the Thrakari didn't. "What's your tactical assessment, Captain?" Sir, the human vessel is approximately 1/10 our size and possesses weapons that should be completely ineffective against our shields. By all logic, this should be a simple matter of disabling their engines and capturing the crew for interrogation. Should be. Yes, sir, should be. But Hicks 7 paused and Vex 9 caught a glimpse of something in the captain's eyes he'd never seen before. Fear. Sir, they're not behaving like any prey species I've ever encountered. They're hunting us. That's impossible. You have a Class 7 warship with full shields and enough firepower to level a small moon. They have what? Projectile weapons and chemical explosives? Yes, sir, but they're using them very creatively. Before Vex 9 could respond, the transmission cut out. The holographic display went dark, and the bridge fell silent except for the soft electronic chirping of various systems. Creeks 4, Vex 9 said quietly, tried to re-establish contact with the Ravager's claw. Attempting now, sir. The minutes stretched by like hours. Vex 9 found himself pacing the bridge, his claws clicking against the metal deck plating. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Sir, I'm not getting any response from the Ravager's claw. Their transponder signal has gone silent. Another ship, another crew, another group of professional hunters who'd walked into what should have been a simple extermination mission and simply vanished. Bring up the tactical display, Vex 9 ordered. Show me the last known position of all missing vessels. The holographic star chart materialized above the central console, red dots marking the locations where Thrakari ships had last been detected. Vex 9 studied the pattern, his military training kicking in despite the growing dread in his chest. They're not random, he muttered. The losses aren't random. Sir? Me. Look at the pattern, Creeks 4. The missing ships form a perimeter around the Terran system. They're not just defending their home world. They're actively hunting our ships. But, sir, that would require coordination, tactical planning, and resources that these humans simply don't possess. Vex 9's mandibles clicked in grim amusement. Creeks 4, 3 rotations ago, we thought these humans didn't possess space flight. Our intelligence on this species has been so catastrophically wrong that I'm beginning to wonder if we're dealing with the same species at all. What do you mean, sir? I mean, Vex 9 said, turning to face his second in command, what if these humans aren't the primitive creatures we expected? What if they're something else entirely? As if summoned by his words, the proximity alarms began wailing. Vex 9 spun toward the sensor station, his heart's racing. Report. Sir, we have multiple contacts approaching from Vector 77 Mark IV. They're moving fast. Define fast. Faster than our ship, sir. Much faster. The tactical display updated, showing 3 small vessels approaching the Eternal Fang at speeds that should have been impossible for ships of their size. Vex 9 studied the sensor readings, his mind racing through possibilities. Weapons status? All systems charged and ready, sir. Raise shields. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Sir, shouldn't we attempt to communicate first? Standard protocol calls for. Standard protocol, Vex 9 interrupted, has gotten 17 ships and their crews killed. We're dealing with something that doesn't follow standard protocol. The human vessels continued their approach, moving with a precision and coordination that spoke of extensive training and experience. Vex 9 watched them close the distance, noting how they moved in perfect formation, covering each other's blind spots and maintaining optimal firing positions. Sir, they're transmitting. Audio transmission? No, sir. Data burst. Extremely complex mathematical sequences. Our computer is having trouble parsing it. Mathematical sequences. Vex 9's compound eyes narrowed. What kind of mathematics? It appears to be tactical calculations, sir. Firing solutions, trajectory plots, damage assessments. It's as if they're sharing targeting data in real time. For the first time since this nightmare began, Vex 9 felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. These weren't primitive hunters stumbling around in the dark. These were apex predators and they'd been studying their prey. "Sir, the lead vessel is hailing us." "Put it through." The holographic display activated, showing the interior of what appeared to be a human command center. A single human sat in the center of the image, wearing some kind of military uniform. The creature was smaller than Vex 9 had expected, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with the pale skin and light-colored hair typical of the species. But the eyes were what made Vex 9's blood run cold. They were the eyes of a predator. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force," the human said, her voice carrying an odd mix of formality and barely contained aggression. "You are trespassing in Terran space." "I am Commander Vex 9 of the Thrakari Confederation," he replied, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "We are conducting a lawful military operation in accordance with—" "No," Captain Vasquez interrupted, her voice flat and final. "You are conducting an illegal invasion of sovereign territory. Your ships have attacked our colonies, destroyed our vessels, and killed our people. This ends now. Captain, you are severely outnumbered and outgunned. I have 3 battle cruisers and enough firepower to reduce your vessels to scrap metal. I suggest you withdraw immediately." Something that might have been a smile crossed the human's features. It was not a pleasant expression. "Commander, you have 1 battle cruiser and 2 escort vessels. Our sensor readings indicate your shields are running at 60% efficiency and your primary weapons array has a 17% power fluctuation. Your port engine is showing micro-fractures in the containment field, and your life support systems are operating beyond recommended parameters." Vex 9 felt his mandibles go slack. Everything she'd said was correct. How could they possibly have such detailed information about his ship's status? Furthermore, Captain Vasquez continued, "Your remaining fleet consists of 14 vessels scattered across a 3 light-year radius, all of which are currently being engaged by Terran forces. Your supply lines have been severed, your communications network has been compromised, and your command structure has been systematically dismantled." "That's impossible," Vex 9 whispered. "Is it?" The human's voice carried a note of dark amusement. "You came here expecting to hunt sheep, Commander. But sheep don't build starships. Sheep don't coordinate fleet movements. And sheep certainly don't spend 3 months studying their hunters before turning the tables. 3 months. We've been tracking your force since you entered the outer system. We know your ship classifications, your weapon specifications, your tactical doctrines, and your command structure. We know that you prefer to engage isolated targets, that you rely heavily on superior technology, and that you've never faced an opponent that could match your strategic capabilities." Vex 9's mind reeled. 3 months. They'd been under observation for 3 months while thinking they were the hunters. "You want to know what we learned about your species, Commander?" Captain Vasquez leaned forward, her eyes boring into the display. "You're very good at killing things that can't fight back, but you've never faced a species that could think like you do. You've never faced a species that could plan like you do. And you've certainly never faced a species that could hunt like you do." "This is impossible," Vex 9 said, more to himself than to the human. "You're a primitive species. You've barely achieved spaceflight." "Commander," Captain Vasquez said, her voice softening slightly, "humanity has been at war for our entire existence. We've fought each other, our environment, our own nature. We've survived ice ages, plagues, and extinction events. We've turned warfare into an art form and survival into a science. Did you really think we wouldn't be ready for something like this?" The tactical display updated, showing the positions of the human vessels. They'd moved while they were talking, Vex 9 realized. They were now in perfect position to target the Eternal Fang's most vulnerable points. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to leave. Take your remaining ships and go home. Tell your Confederation that Earth is not available for conquest. Tell them that humanity is not prey. Tell them that if they want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. And if we refuse..." Captain Vasquez's smile returned, and this time it was genuinely terrifying. Then you'll find out why we're the only species on our planet that hunts for sport. The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge of the Eternal Fang in stunned silence. Vex 9 stared at the empty display, his mind trying to process what he'd just heard. "Sir," Crix 4 said quietly, "what are your orders?" Vex 9 looked at the tactical display, at the 3 human vessels positioned perfectly to destroy his ship, at the red dots marking the locations of 17 missing Thrakari vessels, and at the growing certainty that his species had made a terrible mistake. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "All ships are to withdraw immediately. Maximum speed. No delays." "Sir?" Are we retreating?" "No, Crix 4, Vex 9 said, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. "We're running, and if we're very, very lucky, they'll let us." The Eternal Fang's engines came online, and the massive warship began to turn away from the Terran system. As they fled, Vex 9 couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That somewhere in the darkness of space, human vessels were tracking their every move, calculating their course, and deciding whether to let them live. For the first time in his military career, Commander Vex 9 understood what it felt like to be prey. And he didn't like it one bit. The retreat, if you could call it that, lasted exactly 47 minutes. Commander Vex 9 stood on the bridge of the Eternal Fang, watching the tactical display with growing horror as one by one his fleeing ships winked out of existence. The humans weren't just letting them run. They were picking them off like some twisted game of target practice. "Sir," Crix 4's voice cracked like breaking glass, "the star render has gone silent." That's 8 ships lost during the withdrawal." "8 ships," Vex 9 repeated, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that betrayed his mounting panic. "In less than an hour? How is that possible?" "Sir, the humans appear to have anticipated our retreat route." Of course they had. These creatures seemed to anticipate everything. Vex 9 was beginning to suspect they'd anticipated this entire conflict before the first Thrakari ship had even entered their system. "Navigation. Plot a course for the Kepler Nebula. Maximum speed." "Sir, that route will take us through the asteroid field near." "I don't care if it takes us through the heart of a black hole," Vex 9 snarled. "We need to put distance between ourselves and these humans before they decide to finish what we started." The massive warship altered course, its engines straining against the laws of physics in their desperate attempt to escape. Vex 9 found himself pacing the bridge again, his claws leaving tiny scratches in the metal deck plating. 30 years of military service, and he'd never felt so completely outmaneuvered. "Sir," called out sensor operator Zal 2, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Corks Prime. Priority Alpha." Vex 9's blood turned to ice. Admiral Corks Prime was the supreme commander of the Thrakari military, a warrior whose reputation had been forged in 100 successful campaigns. If he was calling with a priority Alpha transmission, it meant the situation had escalated beyond anything Vex 9 had imagined. "Put him through." The holographic display materialized, showing the imposing figure of Admiral Corks Prime. His massive frame filled the transmission screen, and his 4 eyes glowed with barely contained fury. "Commander Vex 9, the Admiral's voice could have cut through battle steel. Explain to me how a simple extermination mission has resulted in the loss of 23 ships and over 14,000 personnel." "Sir, the intelligence reports were incomplete. These humans are not the primitive species we expected." "Incomplete." Admiral Corks Prime's laugh was about as pleasant as a plasma cannon discharge. "Commander, I have reports of human vessels appearing in 7 different systems simultaneously. They're attacking our supply convoys, our communication relays, and our forward bases. How does a species that supposedly just achieved spaceflight manage to coordinate attacks across 100 light years?" Vex 9 felt his stomach perform some kind of acrobatic maneuver. "Sir, are you saying the humans have left their home system?" "I'm saying the humans are currently engaging our forces in the Proxima sector, the Vega system, and the Centauri trade routes. They're not just defending their territory, Commander. They're invading ours. The bridge fell silent except for the mechanical hum of life support systems. Vex 9 stared at the Admiral's image, his mind struggling to process the implications. "How many ships do they have?" he asked quietly. "That's what I'd like to know. Our best estimates put their initial fleet at maybe 50 vessels. But they're showing up everywhere at once. Either they have cloaking technology that makes our sensors look like children's toys, or they're building ships faster than we can destroy them. Sir, that's impossible. Ship construction takes months, even years. Everything about this species is impossible. Commander, they shouldn't be able to coordinate fleet movements across interstellar distances. They shouldn't be able to match our tactical capabilities. And they certainly shouldn't be able to turn a defensive action into a full-scale offensive in less than a week." Admiral Corks Prime leaned forward, his massive form dominating the display. "But here's what really concerns me, Commander. 3 hours ago we received a transmission from the human leadership. They're offering terms." "Terms?" "Surrender terms. For us." Vex 9's legs nearly gave out. In 3,000 years of Thrakari military history, no enemy had ever offered them surrender terms. They were the ones who dictated terms to defeated opponents. What are the terms? Complete withdrawal from all human territories, reparations for damages caused during the invasion. And here's the interesting part, Commander. They want to establish formal diplomatic relations. It seems these humans are more interested in trade agreements than total war. They're offering to share certain technologies in exchange for guaranteed non-aggression pacts. Vex 9 felt his worldview crumbling like a sandcastle in a tsunami. "Sir, they're offering to help us? After we tried to exterminate them?" "That's exactly what they're doing. Which brings me to my next point, Commander. According to the human diplomatic message, they specifically requested that you be part of the negotiating team." "Me? Why me?" "Because according to Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force, you're the only Thrakari commander who had the intelligence to recognize when he was outmatched." Before Vex 9 could respond, the proximity alarms began wailing. He spun toward the sensor station, his heart racing with familiar dread. "Report. Sir, we have a single human vessel approaching. It's transmitting a diplomatic identification code. 1 ship." "Yes, sir, just one. And Commander, it's requesting permission to dock." Vex 9 stared at the tactical display, watching the lone human vessel approach his massive battle cruiser. Either these humans had nerves of steel, or they knew something he didn't. "What class of vessel?" "It appears to be a modified transport ship, sir. Minimal weapons, enhanced communication arrays, and what looks like diplomatic quarters." "They sent a diplomatic vessel into the middle of a combat zone?" "Sir," Crix 4 said quietly, "I don't think they consider this a combat zone anymore. I think they consider it conquered territory." The truth of those words hit Vex 9 like a physical blow. These humans weren't afraid of his ship because they'd already proven they could destroy it whenever they wanted. They were approaching under diplomatic flags because they'd already won the war. "Sir, the human vessel is requesting to speak with you directly." "Put them through." The holographic display flickered, showing the interior of what appeared to be a human diplomatic vessel. A single figure sat at a conference table, wearing what looked like formal civilian attire. The human was older than Captain Vasquez, maybe 50 standard years, with graying hair and the kind of calm expression that suggested extensive experience in difficult negotiations. "Commander Vex 9, the human said, his voice carrying a diplomatic warmth that was somehow more unsettling than Captain Vasquez's predatory intensity. "I am Ambassador Marcus Webb of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. I believe we need to talk." "Ambassador," Vex 9 replied, trying to project confidence he didn't feel, "I'm not sure what we have to discuss. Your species has made its position quite clear." "Has it? Commander, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human intentions." "May I come aboard your vessel? I believe a face-to-face conversation would be more productive. Every instinct Vex-9 possessed screamed at him to refuse. Allowing an enemy aboard his ship violated every principle of military security he'd ever learned. But something in the human's manner suggested this wasn't really a request. "Very well, Ambassador, you may dock in Bay 7. But I should warn you, this is still a military vessel in a combat zone." Ambassador Webb's smile was genuinely pleasant. "Commander, with respect, there are no combat zones anymore. There are only territories that haven't been properly negotiated yet." 20 minutes later, Vex-9 found himself in the ship's main conference room, sitting across from a creature that should have been prey but somehow radiated the confidence of an apex predator. Ambassador Webb had arrived with a small security detail, but they'd remained politely in the background while the ambassador unpacked what appeared to be a portable diplomatic office. "Coffee?" Ambassador Webb asked, producing a thermal container from his equipment. "I find these conversations go better with caffeine." What? Coffee. It's a human beverage, stimulant properties, but also culturally significant. We tend to conduct important business over coffee. Vex-9 stared at the human, trying to process the surreal nature of the situation. "Ambassador, your species is currently at war with mine. You've destroyed dozens of our ships and killed thousands of our personnel, and you're offering me coffee?" "Commander, we're not at war with your species. We're defending ourselves against an invasion. There's a significant difference. You're attacking our supply lines, our bases, We're neutralizing military threats to ensure the safety of human colonies. Again, there's a difference." Ambassador Webb poured himself a cup of the dark liquid and took a sip before continuing. "Commander, let me ask you something. Why did the Thrakari Confederation decide to invade human space?" "We were conducting a routine elimination of a potential threat." "A potential threat to what?" Vex-9 paused, his mandibles clicking as he considered the question. To galactic stability. Emerging species can become problematic if left unchecked." "I see. And who determines which species are problematic?" "The Confederation has protocols for." "The Confederation decides. Without consulting the species in question, without attempting diplomatic contact, without even conducting proper intelligence gathering." Ambassador Webb's voice remained pleasant, but there was an edge to it now. "Commander, your species has been operating as self-appointed galactic exterminators for 3,000 years. You've eliminated hundreds of civilizations based on the assumption that they might someday become inconvenient. We maintain order. We prevent conflicts that could destabilize entire sectors. You commit genocide to prevent theoretical problems that might never occur." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Vex-9 felt his mandibles go slack as the full implications of what the human had said settled into his consciousness. "Commander," Ambassador Webb continued, "humanity has been studying your species for longer than you realize. We've traced your expansion patterns, your target selections, your operational doctrines. We know about the Alterian hive mind. We know about the Procyon Collective. We know about the Kepler botanical networks." Each name hit Vex-9 like a physical blow. Those were classified operations, some of them dating back centuries. "How could you possibly know about those missions?" "Because we've been preparing for you for a very long time. The moment humanity achieved space flight, we began looking for potential threats. Your species topped that list within a matter of months." Ambassador Webb leaned back in his chair, his expression remaining pleasant despite the devastating nature of his words. "Commander, the Thrakari Confederation has been operating under the assumption that you're the galaxy's apex predators. But you've never faced a species that could match your strategic capabilities. You've never faced a species that could think like you do. And you've certainly never faced a species that could prepare like you do." "This is impossible," Vex-9 whispered. "You're a young species. You've barely achieved interstellar travel." "Commander, humanity has been at war for our entire evolutionary history." We've fought each other, our environment, our own nature. We've survived ice ages, plagues, and extinction events. We've turned warfare into an art form and survival into a science. Did you really think we wouldn't be ready for something like this? The question was eerily similar to what Captain Vasquez had asked, but coming from this diplomatic figure, it carried a different weight. What do you want? Vex 9 asked. Well, we want peace. We want trade. We want to join the galactic community as equals, not as victims or conquerors. And if the Confederation refuses? Ambassador Webb's smile never wavered. Then we'll demonstrate that humanity is not prey. We'll show the galaxy that there's a new apex predator in the neighborhood. And we'll make it very clear that the age of casual genocide is over. You're threatening the entire Confederation? Commander, we're not threatening anyone. We're simply explaining the new reality. The Thrakari Confederation can continue to exist, but it will do so as one civilization among many, not as the self-appointed executioner of emerging species. Vex 9 stared at the human, understanding dawning like a supernova in his consciousness. You're not just defending your territory. You're changing the entire galactic order. Now you're beginning to understand. Humanity isn't interested in conquest or domination. We're interested in survival and prosperity. But we're also interested in ensuring that no species ever again faces the kind of unprovoked aggression you brought to our doorstep. The Confederation will never agree to those terms. Then the Confederation will discover what happens when a species that has perfected the art of warfare decides to go on the offensive. Ambassador Webb finished his coffee and began packing his equipment. Commander, I'm going to give you a choice. You can return to your leadership with our formal diplomatic proposal, or you can continue this conflict and see how it ends. And if I choose to continue fighting? Then in 6 months there won't be a Thrakari Confederation left to negotiate with. The human stood, his security detail moving to escort him from the room. At the doorway he paused and turned back. Commander, your species has spent 3,000 years as the galaxy's apex predator. You've forgotten what it feels like to be hunted. We never forgot what it feels like to hunt. One more thing, Ambassador Webb added, his voice carrying a note of genuine warmth. When you report back to your superiors, tell them that Captain Vasquez sends her regards. And tell them that the next time they want to eliminate a species, they should probably make sure that species hasn't already figured out how to eliminate them first. As the humans departed, Vex 9 remained in the conference room, staring at the empty chair where Ambassador Webb had sat. The full scope of what had happened was finally becoming clear. The Thrakari Confederation hadn't just lost a battle. They'd lost their position as the galaxy's dominant predator, and in the space of a single week, they'd gone from hunters to hunted. The irony was almost too perfect to bear. 3 hours later, Commander Vex 9 stood on the bridge of the Eternal Fang, preparing to transmit the most difficult report of his career. The human diplomatic vessel had departed, leaving behind only a data packet containing formal treaty proposals and what appeared to be a complete analysis of Thrakari military capabilities. "Sir," Krix 4 said quietly, "what are your orders?" Vex 9 looked at the tactical display, where the remaining Thrakari vessels were slowly regrouping. 12 ships, out of an initial force of 47, set course for home, he said finally, in maximum speed. "Sir, are we surrendering?" "No, Krix 4, we're adapting. Because if we don't, there won't be a confederation left to surrender." As the Eternal Fang began its long journey home, Vex 9 couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That somewhere in the darkness of space, human vessels were tracking their every move, calculating their course, and deciding whether to let them live. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Thrakari Confederation had encountered a species that hunted better than they did. And humanity had just announced to the galaxy that the age of casual extinction was over. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were terrified.